Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. We had promised to start, and I don't want to keep you waiting. For those who are on their way to work, please put your radio volume low, or put it off actually, so that you can listen in this morning. We are glad to present to you the topic today. We're going to be talking about excelling with millennials and Gen Zs at the workplace. Millennials and Gen Zs at the workplace. I do not want to preempt any of our panelists today, so I will not do any discussions. My responsibility today is just one, to present to you the topic and also to introduce the different panelists. This webinar or this session is brought to you by Minet. I'll have a colleague of mine come and tell you who exactly Minet is, so you can get on board. Keith Wabwire works with Minet, and I'll hand over to him to talk to us about who Minet is and what Minet does, and then we can get on with the session. Keith, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Doreen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Keith Wabwire. I work with Minet Uganda Insurance Brokers Limited. Minet is a trusted Pan-African brand that is passionate about securing Africa's future by delivering innovative and relevant risk and human capital solutions through fostering relationships with key partners and creating an impact that is transformational in the communities in which we serve. Minet is a global brand with colleagues in over 120 different countries, creating value and impacting communities in all those nations. So today we are here to deliver our monthly webinar, like Doreen has introduced, and it is going to be focusing in an area that Minet is really passionate about, that is the human capital solutions, talking about how you can leverage one of the biggest populations in the workforce today, the Gen Zs and Millennials, to have productive and successful organizations. That is who Minet is. Thank you, Doreen.
Thank you so much, Keith. Keith said that Minet's vision is securing Africa's future. How do we secure Africa's future? We're in the business of risk advisory, we're in business of reinsurance, and we're also in the business of human capital solutions. Human capital solutions are wide. You know, you talk about medical insurance, you talk about wellness solutions, and today we're mainly focused on wellness solutions. How do we secure, tomorrow? We're talking about wellness solutions. We've had wellness and mental health has become an issue. It has always been an issue, but I think the discussion has become very clear in the past few years. And in the workplace now, we have a number of people who act different. We have a number of people who act different. We have the young generation, the millennials and the Gen Zs. And for the old people, for a while, they did not know how to handle them. They didn't know how to handle them, but we've realized that we cannot ignore them. We definitely cannot ignore them. And that's why every month, Minet comes with a topical issue to discuss these things that we can no longer ignore. We bring on board thought leaders, specialists who are going to talk about different topics to demystify some of the things that are there in the workplace so that we can all excel. Today, I am pleased to present to you our thought leaders for today. I will give a very brief description of who they are, but when they come to engage with us, they'll tell us more about what they do, and you'll be able to understand them. Our first panelist today is Shamim Matovu. Shamim is a business anthropologist. She will tell you what a business anthropologist means. When I read anthropologist, I was thinking about science. We're talking about business, and I was thinking, what does an anthropologist do? But Shamim will talk to us very, very briefly. Shamim is a business transformation advisor and an architect of change. She blends business anthropology and transformational insight to create pathways to success for many organizations. She's a graduate of the London School of Economics and is currently pursuing her doctorate. In her long decade of work, she supports companies to ensure their culture is aligned, belonging, and bringing equity back into the workplace. Welcome, Shamim. Please say hi to our viewers.
Thank you very much, Doreen. Good morning, viewers. My name is Shamim, and nice to have you here.
Okay, thank you so much, Shamim. You are welcome. Our next panelist is Leona Buhenzire, commonly known as Tura. Tura is a clinical psychologist and behavior scientist with a master's degree in mental health and clinical psychology, and she's spent the past 20 years in the mental health space. Who knew that mental health discussions have been here for the past 20 years? Some of us just started hearing about them, the last 5 years or the last 3 years. But Tura has been in that space for about 20 years, and she'll speak to us about what she's been doing all that while. Tura, as she's commonly known, supports both individuals and organizations in the areas of mental health, demystifying many mental health misconceptions and bringing awareness on mental health matters. She has hands-on experience in diagnosis, evaluation and treatment of emotional and behavior issues for both children and adults, and is also a professional individual therapist. Welcome, Tura. Please say hi to our viewers.
Thank you so much. What an incredible introduction. Thank you, and I'm really happy to be here.
Okay, you're welcome. And our last but not least panelist is Joseph Ajal. I am sure we know Joseph. Joseph is a friend of Minet, and we have had him here before. Joseph is a human capital specialist, and he's an associate certified coach and HR professional with over 15 years in talent development. I feel like 15, it's more than 15 years.
The combined total is actually 20.
Yes, I know. When I saw the 15, I thought it was more. So with about 20 years in talent development, Joseph is dedicated to the transformative impact of individuals within organizations. He has practiced HR in a number of sectors, has led and coached diverse teams, and has quite a number of achievements in the human resource management space. Joseph is a president of the International Coach Federation, ICF, Uganda chapter, and has spent the last 4 years coaching and working with organizations as a development consultant. He's also an advocate of mental health and has been passionately bringing awareness around topics of mental health even before mental health became a thing. Like I said, some of us think mental health has just become a thing, but I've known Joseph for quite some time, and he's been passionate about talking about mental health, demystifying all those things about mental health, and for pushing for healthy mental health. You're welcome, Joseph.
Thank you very much, Doreen. It's always an honor being with you and with the team here at Minet. Just a slight correction. I am the immediate past president of ICF Uganda Charter Chapter. I don't want to get in trouble with the current president.
No, thanks for that clarification. So you are welcome this morning. We're going to get onto the topic. Like I'd said, we've talked about Gen Zs, we've talked about millennials. We have different misconceptions about them. But today we are here to demystify them. We are here to learn, for anybody who is there, a business owner, a CEO, a manager, a parent, who is dealing with millennials. Anybody who is dealing with millennials and Gen Zs, we want to know, how do we work with them? How do we thrive with them? How do we get the best out of them? And just to start us off, I'd like to invite Shamim. Shamim, when you come in, please tell us what anthropologist means, And then Shamim will give us the trends about the millennials and the Gen Zs and give us a description of exactly who these people are. Shamim, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Doreen. My name is Shamim K. Matovu. I am professionally a business anthropologist. Now, anthropologists study people through culture. And so we are the people that are trained, the professionals that are trained to help organizations curate cultures. And I know that this conversation has been so much available post-COVID, and people talk about culture in organizations, but also understanding when we talk about, for example, the millennials and how we get on with people in the work environment, is that culture plays a big part in the work environment, and you have to design that culture. It doesn't just come up. So when we speak of the toxic cultures, it's because we haven't taken the time to curate the cultures that we want. So as an anthropologist who works in business, what I do is to work with corporate organizations to help them design a culture that causes alignment, belonging, and bring equity back into the work environment. I am the founder and CEO of Discover. That's where I serve. And Discover is a culture design company. And basically what we do is to partner with business leaders and their teams to design cultures that bring exactly what I just explained. Thank you. So anthropology is both a social science and a political science. And a lot of the times when we talk about anthropology, we talk about, there is a lot of social political commentary around that, because we as a science, we get to understand who people are, how their DNA, the makeup, the behavior aspect, but also from the political element. We've heard of politics in the work environment. So when we talk about conflicts or healthy conflict, whether it's healthy or unhealthy, the kind of interactions that we have in the work environment are a political aspect. And so that's specifically what we do, dive into that and demystify it for the organization so you can have a harmonious environment for you to be able to deliver according to the promise of your clients and perhaps the vision of the organization that you lead. But when we come into speaking about Gen Zs and millennials, this is something that is very prominent right now. If you look at the market, millennials and Gen Zs are taking up the work environment. And we can go back to understanding the demographic transition element on how we get there, which really is a concept that explains to us how both the mortality, the birth and death rates really get to cause a substantive change in the distribution of age within the population. So if you think of, and a lot of the times this demographic transition element has been used by demographers to explain how economic growth connects with population change. So if you look at the different stages, we look at the pre-industrial stage, the urbanization stage when people move from rural communities to come into the urban centers to look for employment. Then we look at the industrial stage and then the post-industrial stage era. And all those have characteristics that reflect to the changes and distribution in the environment or the population within which we live. So a lot of the Gen Zs and millennials, we can say that, are from the Generation X, who are mostly potentially our leaders right now. And so the disparity in how that age distribution is also shows the characteristics that are different because we've been brought up in different spaces. Now, I will use a lot of we because I am a millennial. And so from that perspective, I understand what work means for me and my rights in the work environment. And so perhaps I will assert myself differently from the Generation X and maybe Generation Y. And so looking at the disparity, and if you look at Uganda as a country, there's been the issue of age. We've talked about it in many times, but perhaps we haven't looked at it in a manner that is constructive for us. Because we can't just complain about, we have old people. Old people are not a problem. Nothing is a problem. It's what becomes a problem is if we fail to align and understand each other. We all want to be heard and listened to. We want to be understood. And so if you look at the distribution of our leadership, mostly you'll find that Generation X, Generation Y around that stage. And so when they are dealing with millennials and Gen Zs, they're thinking, these people are so entitled. No, we are not entitled. We are just raised in a different era and we like different things. But who are millennials and who are Gen Zs? So we'll say millennials are people that are born between 1981 and 1998. And so that's between the age of 27 and 42. That is a huge gap. If you look in this room, for example, I would say a lot of us are millennials, right? And then the Gen Zs are between 1997 to 2012, so 11 to 26 years. And if you look at the distribution of the workforce within only Uganda, for example, you'll see that that's a huge group. Now, not to forget that there's another group that is coming, the Alpha generation, who are going to be even worse if we don't get to understand exactly what we're dealing with right now. And worse in the way, not worse in a bad way, but the technological savviness of these people is different from what we perhaps have seen. And so what that means, and it's a check for us as leaders in businesses to understand that we have to shift with the changes. We can't continue to be crybabies about generations. We have to understand people and see how do we move forward with them. But if we look at also the behavior characteristics of these people and even ourselves, for example, if I am stuck on something, I'll go on YouTube. How do I do A, B, C, and D?
AI.
Absolutely. So I am a doctorate candidate and I'm between academia and the practice environment, but it doesn't mean that every time I need to understand something, I have to go and do a doctorate in that, whatever that is. I can go on YouTube and find that perhaps Joseph did a video on something, and so I get the information there and then. And so a lot of us in that space are using technology to create, to live a life, to share our passion with the environment, with people. to share our dreams, our passions, but also looking at how we can support or play our part within the spaces that we're in. So when you look at what really drives us, it could also be as much as if, for example, and I look at this in the perspective of when I'm traveling, for example. If I'm going somewhere and I've never been, if I'm going to book a hotel, I'll have to look at people's reviews. And just one review of someone saying this will get me out of that. And so that is how we operate in our realm, right? And it could be quite different from our leaders, our mothers, our parents as well. They perhaps look at us and think, this is quite different to deal with, because then you are challenging your parent to say, oh no, by the way, I am an adult, you're my mother, but I make my own decisions. And I believe that many parents are experiencing that, but it still comes back into when we are in the work environment, how different is it? Is it as different as we think, or do we think that it's as complex, or we just haven't paid attention? So the characteristics really between Gen Zs and Millennials are similar. The difference is the age, and perhaps maybe the urge in which we get into those spaces. So the younger generation of the Millennials will actually get into doing the things that they want, take more risks to actually explore spaces, understand how things work, create other revenue streams of income, find opportunities for themselves. Whereas in the older times, people were quite skeptical. And that's why we see that the older generation, now I worked in the UK, and a lot of the companies that I worked with, you'd find people that have been in jobs for 50 years. 50 years. The person came in as an intern, and they are retiring in the same company. Now, that is something I don't see happening with our generation, because we get bored. Yeah. The moment I realize that your organization is taking, their vision doesn't really align with mine, or the values, the culture doesn't align with mine, I'll start to look for my way, right? And so a lot of us in this space, in the work environment, looking at the Gen Zs and the Millennials, we are about our own purpose. So if you look at post-COVID conversations, in Uganda, I was following conversations that were happening. A lot of conversations were around purpose and potential. And so looking at people asking themselves, this job that I've been waking up to every day, does it really, do I feel it?
Does it serve me?
Does it serve me? Why do I wake up? And you see, we find a lot of this in organizations where you go and you find someone who's so rude. You say, hi, good morning, or you stand, because I work in that space, I like to do that. I can get into a work environment, whether it's in a bank, and I just stand there to see if you've noticed me. And I do that intentionally, because my belief is that if you love your job, you will notice the person before you, right? And so you go to spaces where you look at somebody, you stand there, maybe you say good morning, and they respond to you like, what are you doing here?
Gen Zs are not about pleasantries.
and I don't really want to say that it's the Gen Zs, but it's really a check for business leaders to match people where their energies are. If my energy and my potential and my purpose and my skill is not in that space, don't force me. A lot of managers are actually catalysts of this kind of behavior, because you notice that a person is not good at something, but you place them there. And some organizations do that intentionally because they want you to go. So they are not finding ways, they are foregoing having those difficult conversations of managing your performance. Or they have actually failed you, because organizations also fail people, right? And so what they do is to put you in a place where they know you won't perform. Maybe a client will complain about you and then they fire you. These things happen, and I'm telling you that because I am in depth in how organizations really operate. And so what that means is that we need to focus so much of our attention on how we can develop talent, because now millennials and employees, the relationship that we are challenging the status quo in the relationship between employers and employees. Whereas in the past generation, the employer had an upper hand. Today, I'm actually saying, no, I'm sorry, these terms don't work for me. If you want to have me, these are the terms I expect you to have with me. So I can negotiate my pay, I can negotiate my terms of employment. Unlike before, when organizations tell you, okay, this is the contract sign, and people just sign, they don't even read. Today, Millennials and Gen Zs will read one by one because they know what's important to them. But besides that, looking at all that, let us not look at it as a problem. What are the opportunities that for business in this kind of space? The attitude that Gen Zs and Millennials bring in the work environment is really a challenge for organizations to accelerate their digital transformation. Because what we're interested in is a life-work balance. Are you really in a space where you worry about, or you're concerned about my life as well? So I am looking at a space where you don't need me to be at your desk from 8 to 5. I don't have that time. My time is my investment, right? And so if I can do my work in Canada, but I'm working for Minet, why not? I will take up, and I'll tell you that if Minet were giving me less money than another company was giving me, and I have that flexibility, I will take up Minet. Because what's important to me is not really the paycheck. What's important to me is the value of my time and being able to do the things that I'm passionate about. That if a company in Canada invited me to speak about culture in organizations, because that's what I breathe, right? Minet will not say, oh no, you can't go because you have to be at the desk. I can go and do that gig, then come back and do my work, or even do my work while I'm there.
So Shamim, what you're saying, you bring out something very interesting.
Yeah.
You seem to say that previously, whereas we were supposed to adjust to fit the workplace, now workplaces must adjust to fit our different personalities.
Absolutely. And that's a huge challenge. It doesn't mean that you can't do it. What it means is that employers have to invest in consultants who are experts in what they do, because sometimes also we want to do things for ourselves. We are not experts at everything. Get experts who understand this work to do it for you, right? And so that's why today we're talking about multidisciplinary approaches of doing business. So if you look at the panel, for example, Joseph is in HR, right? I'm equally in HR because my practice is in human capital. She's a clinical psychologist. We all bring a different value into the work environment. Get people who are experts in their space to help you deal with these things, because a lot of employers are talking about, we don't care about emotions. We are not robots. We are people. And if you want to connect with me, you're going to have to feel me.
To care for my emotions.
Absolutely. If you can't feel me or acknowledge my emotions, I am gone. I've had a conversation with a young person who arrived to work late. And we were chatting, and the person told me, oh, I got to work late because it was raining and I didn't have a car. I said, excuse me? And I said, I want you to write to your boss and tell them you're sorry. You won't do it again. And the person insisted, telling me, I don't have a car, but my colleagues do. I said, you want your boss to buy you a car? I said, no. And I said, you need to apologize. I don't feel like I want to do it. I said, why? I don't know. I just don't feel like. I said, okay, this is the advice I'll give you. If you happen to write to your boss, write and say you're sorry, you arrived late, and you won't do it again. Don't tell your boss about not having a car, because it's not your boss's responsibility. This is the generation we're living with, right?
See, that is why we said, is it that they know their rights, or are they just entitled? Because that reads so much entitlement.
Yes. So there is a bit of entitlement as well, but I could not say it's entitlement. It's because we haven't paid attention to understanding where they're coming from. Now, when I sat with this person, they told me the boss found them, like when you're in a lobby and someone shouts at you and says, go back home. Like, being a boss doesn't mean you disrespect me. Right? So as a leader, we have an obligation to say we do leadership in a polite way. Our responsibility is to care for the people that we lead. We are there to serve and not to boss them around. And so that challenges the quality of our leadership as well in how we do business. How can we do this going forward? Because, if you look at the statistics, for example, according to World Economic Forum, by 2025, a third of our workforce will be Gen Zs. So just imagine that we still can't understand and we can't focus into investing to understand these people. We are going to have a commotion in the work environment. And so what then happens, that affects your bottom line, and your clients will be complaining and they will leave. If you look at how work is segmented today, work is not what it used to be. Today, we have a lot more people who are actually doing their own gigs. Like, there's a lot of freelance work. People do their work and they get paid well. Like I say, this generation is not about how much money they're taking home or the benefits you're giving them, NSSF and all that. No. It's about my freedom, my time. Am I doing the things I love? Do I wake up to speak about the things that I care about today? Is that what really makes me breathe, right? So as I finalize, I think what's important for us to understand in terms of how employers can best bring out the best in these people. Embracing technology, because that's the way we want to work. We don't want to be, seated on the desk. Be very flexible and acknowledge work-life balance, because we want to be able to go to blankets and wine and also do our work, right? Wow. Continuous learning and development. We want to develop, because if you think of the previous way of doing work, people climbing a corporate ladder, that's too long. No one has the time to wait for that anymore. Collaboration and diversity. acknowledging that we're different. In some workspaces, if people want to wear their jeans, let them be. If that's the code, understand what people want and ensure that it fits your brand as well. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Shamim. You talked about jeans. It's not like they mind the people wearing jeans, but sometimes our customers' perceptions. So how do we strike that balance? You don't want your high-level customers walking into an organization and everybody is wearing, jeans, tank tops and everything.
We have classy jeans, so let us be very particular. No ripped jeans, but we have classy jeans. We have people who wear smart casual, and they're very, very smart.
Okay. Thank you so much, Shamim. So much to learn. We'll be unpacking a lot of that later in the Q&A. And I'd like to quickly go to Tura. You've spent the last 20 years talking to millennials, talking to Gen Zs. I know that you are a millennial yourself.
Can I just quickly correct those 20 years?
Yes.
And remove 2 from those years because 2 matter.
Don't we change the bracket?
18 is smaller than 20. Please don't kill my market.
Okay, almost 20 years. Let's call it almost 20 years.
Yes.
Tura, tell us your experience around these people and how they behave and how we can adapt, to live with them and understand them. Tell us through your experience. I know you've spent quite some time dealing with them. I follow you on social media and you've had very many conversations with and about these people. Tell me what your experience has been.
First of all, I barely made it into the millennial bracket. There are people here. Joseph, did you make it into that? Are you a millennial? Huh?
I missed by 1 year.
I barely made it into the millennial bracket, so thank God that I'm actually relevant here. And I have a son who is actually turning 16. So he is in the perfect Gen Z circle. And what I did was, instead of coming up with a PowerPoint program, I asked him what he thinks of us, millennials, and we had a very interesting conversation, which a lot of that conversation is where I deducted what I want to say today. So if you look at the statistics online, some of this data is not very Africa-based, right? Like when you look at the definitions for Gen Z and Generation X, Y, and Z, it's not very. Let's look at our Ugandan demographic.
Exactly.
Yeah. Most of our parents, some are lucky that their grandparents went to school and whatnot, but majority of us, our grandparents didn't actually go to school, and it's our parents were the first generation, if you're lucky. Our parents were the first generation to go to school and to try and just rise above that poverty line, right? A lot of the stories that we had as millennials were to do with the war and survival for the fittest. Survival for the fittest, really. Now, they did everything possible. If somebody is growing up during a time of extreme survival, there are some things that are expected of that person and how they are raising their children. And those are the ones who raised us millennials, right? Then the millennials, we didn't grow up. A lot of the data online says that millennials are tech savvy, but I don't think that we're actually tech savvy. I think that Generation Z is tech savvy. I think we are tech dependent, which is different because we didn't actually grow up with all of this technology. It hit us somewhere in the middle.
It's a new adoption.
It's a new adoption. Yeah, I had my first phone at university. Facts. Wait, maybe A6 VAC. But anyway, the ballpark, I was already in my 20s. So I don't know about tech savvy. I think we are tech dependent because we have no option but to depend on technology. It's here and it's not going anywhere. Gen Z is definitely tech savvy. So if we were to continue to compare Generation X, Y, and Z, and look at the progression of evolution, right? And look at, in behavior science, we believe that behavior is learned between the ages of 0 to 7. And some scientists argue that it's 0 to 10. But that's the ballpark. You learn, in that age, you learn who you are, how the world works, what money looks like, what relationships look like, how to resolve conflict.
7 years?
0 to 7, 0 to 10.
How am I learning about money?
That is where
At 6 years.
that is where your neural pathways are forming habit and behavior. So how are you learning about your money? How does your mom behave when she's broke? What does your mom do to earn a living? What does your dad do to earn a living? What are you learning about men and provision? What are you learning about women and provision or nurture? If you're raised by a single mom, what's your understanding of provision and nurture? If you're raised by both parents, that's where you learn all of it, right? So after that, we're just resounding what we already learned. So if we're, and this is not off of my assumptions, this is empirically based, right? There's journal after journal after journal to prove this. So if we know that this is a fact and that's when we learned behavior, what have we taught the generation after us as millennials? And if we think that they're inadequate, then we know where that inadequacy is coming from. I think that a big mistake that we make is to look, it's not new for the current generation to look at the following generation as useless and inadequate. That's not new. Our parents looked at us like that. Their parents looked at them like that. You know, my mom is just like, when I joined the Makerere, and I chose I chose this career. She was certain I was going to do law. She filled in my papers in Gayaza. I have to do law, and then I chose other. She's like, "What are you good like? Okay? Have you lost your mind? Yeah? Why are you not lawyer, doctor, accountant? You know,
engineer.
What's up with that? Right? You know, so." Oh, a teacher.
A teacher,
I don't know about that side. Teachers in Uganda have been, it's a full struggle. But
it's a struggle,
it's
but
been
it
a full,
was one of the reputable, you know.
It was one of, so our, no, our mom's generation, a lot of them are teachers.
Yeah.
And yes. So anyhow, I think we make a big mistake in making, one of the biggest mistakes we make is to assume that our children are an extension of us. Our children are individuals. They're independent. They're entities on their own. And we have the job to nurture them, not as an extension of us, but as fully formed entities on their own. Because once you see them as an extension of you, as most of us African parents do, including myself, you know, we stand, we stand, this is where the rebellion comes from. This is where our children are not, they're different. So Gen Z, for example, they're very diverse in their thinking. Gen Z is so diverse that they don't even see diversity when they walk into a room. Actually, they see the lack thereof.
Of diversity.
The lack thereof, yes. Right? When a Gen Z person looks at a panel that includes President Museveni and Bobi Wine, he sees no difference. It's the millennial or before that who says, wasn't this guy a rapper? How come he's a politician now? That's outdated, right? But you think the other generation is crazy for thinking that way. That's because of your limited closed-mindedness, because a lot of us think that inexperience, which is younger, is inadequacy. But it's not. Inexperience, because we look at the younger generation and think they are less or useless or lazy or slow because we have more experience than them. We've been through more things in life. Typically speaking, right? We think we know much more. We think, and maybe we even do because we've lived longer. But they know their own things. The same way you look at your mom or your dad's business, and you can see, you would do it differently. Yeah. But you can't really air that out because there's no safe environment to air that out. So you just wait. You just wait for the generation to pass, and then you go and run that business. Wow. Other than that, they're just going to step all over you, right? Generation Z is big on inclusivity. Yeah, they are very big on inclusivity, which we are so not. They are big on authenticity. We are not we are bigger on community.
It's because we didn't have the safe space. You know, when you talk about authenticity,
right.
For them,
right.
The safe space has been created, you know, either by, by taking up space for them or for the space to be created. Because in workplaces, in homes, we are creating the safe space. You have created the safe space for your sons to be able to speak about how they feel. Our parents didn't create that. So when you talk about authenticity, again, it also depends on what generation, you know. what generation you're in.
You know, we can say that Gen Z has way more flexibility than we do. But when we're talking about authenticity and the importance of it, let me tell you a relatable revelation. I'm a Christian, and I had this revelation when I was asking God about authenticity as a behavior scientist. And here's the thing. A lot of us are trying to see the body is one, and it is perfect with all the different parts. Yeah, the heart is there to pump. The liver is there to cleanse toxins. The limbs are there for a different job. The brain is there for a different job. If all of those parts, the eyes are here to see and nose to smell, when all of those parts do their different job to the best of their capacity, it creates the whole, a perfect whole. The problem with us is that we are a limbs trying to act like a kidney.
To detox.
That is the very inauthenticity of us, right? So now, for us, we believe to make it in life, if you don't want to go back to the poverty where we came from, that's now our generation before millennials, right? You must be a lawyer, you must be a doctor, you must be, you see, because that's what they know to be true. So now, I'm a kidney that is being forced to act as a liver, because it's the livers which make money, which are relevant. But no matter how much I try, I might look like I'm doing it, but I might even come close. I might learn to act like I'm doing it, but I could never actually do it like a kidney does, right? No matter how much I try. That's the power in authenticity. And the more modern an environment gets anyway with evolution, the more individualistic people get. That's why people in the most modern economies or countries or most egalitarian economies, most people live on their own. And that's why the depression rates are higher. That is why anxiety is higher with Gen Z, right? It's that sense of individuality. So they're not disputing your sense of community. No, they just have a stronger sense of authenticity and individuality. And if we can open our minds up to not be closed into it's either or, and open and make space for them, then that would be a much more collaborative work environment, right? They have shorter attention spans. These are people who have grown up with technology. When my son was born in 2007, the iPhones were here, right? In fact, it was his first phone, you know? Yes. So because I need to, when I go to work, I need to be able to communicate with him at home, right? So I got an iPhone here in my...
After COVID. After COVID.
Let me not tell you when I got it. Let's just not say.
At least you have it. That's what matters.
Let's just say it's not too long ago. I was well into my 40s.
Yeah.
So these are people who have grown up with this level of technology. Yeah, my son knows how to trade online. My son spends a lot of time on the computer, which I used to try and prevent and get him to go outside, which also has its purposes. But they have completely different interests in that. And when I asked him, what would you ask people of my generation to do differently? Yeah, he said, give me the permission to fail. You know, what if our parents gave us the permission to fail without freaking out and making it seem like the world is going to end? What if they did that? That would have given us much more courage and motivation to be in all the family businesses that we've run out of.
They couldn't give us that permission. They had invested their everything.
After dodging bullets
yes.
and dodging crocodiles swimming to school.
Yes, and invested their everything for education. So there's no, no, Tura, you bring out very, very interesting insights. Yeah. And that is talking about millennials and Gen Zs in homes, in the different places they are at. But now I'd like to bring the conversation into the workplace, and I'd like to ask Joseph, you know, you're talking about the home. You know, for example, the home, there's a safe space maybe to fail. Somebody can be authentic. But Joseph, you spent over 15 years, you know, as an HR expert in different sectors. How do we work with these millennials? How do we create everything? Shamim and Tura have talked about allowing them to fail, understanding them. Now we've got to bend to suit them instead of them bending to suit what the organization wants. Tell me about that. What do we need to do? What support systems can we put in place to ensure that we are thriving? Because the organization has a goal. You know, the organization has a goal. But how do we thrive in the organization with them and also ensure that they also thrive?
Thank you very much, Doreen. As a matter of fact, I just want to start from the very basics. I practice also as adjunct faculty. So I teach at a university. I teach at Strathmore University Business School. And I'd like to give a bit of context because we've talked about generations since 2010, I think. In my practice in HR, we've spoken about generations since 2010. So it's been 13 years of doing pretty much similar things. So let's start to before 1900. Because when we talk about generations, this whole conversation has been about millennials and Gen Zs, which is great. But there are 5 active generations in the workplace. Not 2, 5. So before 1900, we call that the lost generation. Why? They are dead. They are lost. We don't have anybody in that generation. There are very, very few. Maybe if somebody can live to beyond 123 years, that's a very, very strong old man or woman. I hope so. But they are hardly there. So we don't have those anymore. It's a lost generation. From about 1910 onwards, you still have a few of those. They are called the silent generation or traditionalists. Why silent? Why traditionalists? Because not much is seen or heard of them anymore. But you still have some really, really elderly people, even in our villages, in their 90s, who are still on the farms. So they are still in the workspace. Next, you have those born after 1945. Between 1945 and 1963, those are called baby boomers. Baby boomers are our parents. They are our mothers and our fathers. Some of them are still in the workspaces, actively employed. Because if you look at somebody born between 1945 and 1963, they are between the ages of the late 50s and early 70s. So some of them are still in employment, running businesses, chairing boards, CEOs. They are still even in employment in regular companies where they are between the ages, like say if the retirement age is 65, some of them are still active in employment. Then after that, you have the Generation X. The Generation X is born between 1964 and 1980. That's why when Leona was saying, she barely made it to the millennials.
It's the one she survived. Is that
she barely made it. I barely made it on the other side. So I'm at the end, extreme end of Gen X, because I'm born in June 1980. So what that means is that us Gen X's and the upper generation of millennials or Gen Ys are similar. Now let me correct a misnomer. There is no hard and fast absolute shift in behavior between generations, especially plus minus 5 years. They are very similar. Plus minus 5, they are very similar in terms of behavior. That's why when we talk about millennials, we also add Gen Zs. Gen Zs basically means Generation Z or Centennials. Another name for Gen Zs is Centennials. Another name for millennials is Gen Y. So let's not confuse and conflate the two things. Gen Y also means millennials, and Gen X is just Gen X. That's we. So, coming to the point of how do we maximize their potential and extract their fullest capabilities at the workspaces. Number one, act with them from a point of knowledge. Oh, by the way, before we move, there's yet another generation coming up now. It's called the Gen Alphas. Shamim mentioned it at the beginning. The Alphas are still in school. Our kids are Gen Z or Gen Z or Centennials, our children. Some of them are already in the workspaces in that generation, born after 1997. Others are still in school, so they are our children. Now, after that will be the Gen Alphas. The Alphas are coming after. So when you finish all the letters of the alphabet up to Z, you go back to A. That's why we call it Alpha, the Greek alphabet. So how do we maximize their potential? Number one, act with them or act with them from a point of knowledge. Assign them knowledge and honor. Do not belittle them. Don't refer to these young people in workspaces as my son, my daughter. No. They are not your children. They are your colleagues. They hate the fact that you call them my son, my daughter. No.
Because we keep saying, oh, workplace, that's a family, so I think we brought out everything.
It can be a family, but you don't have to call me your son or your daughter. I have my parents. I know my mom and my dad.
It's condescending.
You're not my mother or my father. You're condescending.
Yeah.
You're disrespecting. Yet, in fact, I might be so good at what I do. I might be the best software developer at 18 or 19. Allow me to be respected for what I bring to the workspace, not my age. Secondly, assign them to mentors as early as possible. These people have a high risk of running what we call the induction crisis or derailment in talent management. As a certified talent practitioner myself and as a trainer, a 3-dimensional mentor and a certified professional coach and coach trainer, I know for a fact that oftentimes derailment hits this generation harder than it hits the Gen Xs and the baby boomers. The baby boomers, my dad worked for one company from 1975 to 2017.
Wow.
For 42 years, he worked for UEB, Umeme, and UEDCL somewhere in the middle. But it was one company. He only knew one employer as an electrical engineer. All he knew was one employer. My mother worked as a teacher. So all she knew was Ministry of Education. Whether she changed schools and met eventually and retired as head teacher, she knew just one employer, which was Ministry of Education. Today, in my 20 years career, I've worked for over 7 employers now. Over 7 employers in 20 years, which is an average of, you can do the math. The longest has been 5 in one employer and 5 in another employer. NSSF and now Precision HR. 5, 10. But previous to that, I was averaging 2 years.
Wow.
So when you're extracting the most out of a millennial or a centennial, even if they serve you for 2 to 3 years, they deserve a long service award.
Wow.
Yes. Because you'd be fortunate that they serve you for 3 months.
So long service awards are not for people who have been in the workplace for 10
years?
10 years? No.
That is for baby boomers and Gen Xs. But millennials and centennials, 2 to 3 years, they deserve a long service award. Because they're impatient.
Yeah.
They love instant gratification.
Yeah.
So find means and ways to connect them with the things that make them excited. Have clubs. Have events. Have things like TGIF. When I worked at NSSF, we had a very interesting leader called Elijah Kitaka. He was the head of information technologies, now the head of engineering at Stanbic Bank. He introduced a chill room in the IT department. There was a pool table, there were yoga balls, there was a beer fridge, but you could only go there after 5. There was darts, there was table tennis. Within the office, you could literally take a lunch break and go play table tennis. So introduce spaces such as those. Introduce a creche. Because these people are mothers. They are in the active birth-giving age. So if you introduce a lactation room or a creche, you allow the mother to either go and express milk or breastfeed. So instead of staying home after 4 months of maternity leave, as well as annual leave, so it's usually 3 months of maternity and then 1 month of annual leave, they come back after 4 months. So by the 5th month, the baby is not ready to be left alone. After all, you should exclusively breastfeed for 6 months. So they can bring the baby to the creche with a nanny, and then every 2 hours, they can go and breastfeed that baby. Or they can express milk in a lactation room, and then allow the baby to be fed whilst she's at her desk working. Also, introduce flexi working time. Don't insist on people working at the desk if they want to work from home. Right now, my organization at Precision HR, we've been working remotely for the last 4 weeks because the office is undergoing renovation and repairs, and there's major construction works going on. Shamim and I work in the same spaces. It's called Venture Labs. Venture Labs has shifted from its previous location to a new location 5 blocks away. There's massive construction works going on. All of us are working remotely, but the work is going on perfectly on time. That's flexing work.
It's because, Joseph, and like you said, the plus and the minus 5 years, it's because you're more or less a millennial. You can understand that people are able to work from home and deliver 100%. But you see, Shamim talked about something and said we have millennials, we have Gen Zs who are being led by baby boomers. Now, for a baby boomer, for Joseph to work, you must be at your desk at 8, looking into your laptop up to 5 p.m., then they will understand that you're giving in the work.
Yes.
You know? But for Joseph, who is a millennial, he understands that you're able to do the work, you know, as long as he set parameters, you know, to measure productivity. You know, but for a baby boomer, how do you convince them that I can work from home, not looking at my computer at my desk 8 to 5, and convince you that it's not about my being present?
Okay. Excellent question, Doreen. So most millennials and Gen Zs are what you call digital natives, not digital immigrants. Most of us are digital immigrants, meaning we arrived on the digital scene way after technology had become commonplace. So we immigrated into the digital world, right? Like my friend here, Leona, whose first iPhone was a few years ago. Your own example. But the point is that these, like our children, they are born with information technology.
Yeah.
Some of us parents even have bad habits of giving the child a tablet to play with when they are crying, which obviously builds other addictions, dopamine, which you don't want to talk about right here. But these young colleagues of ours are actually digital natives, meaning they can work anywhere in the world. They're tech nomads. They can be on a beach, on their phone, on their tablet, and they are working. It's okay. In my organization, we don't have arrival time and departure time. Come when you want, leave when you want, but leave when the work is done.
We have arrival time, but we don't have departure time.
And in addition to that, allow these people to express themselves. These people love to be heard. Create a safe space for them to express themselves. If you're a baby boomer boss, what happened in the lockdown? We were stuck at home. Now, if you are insisting people have to be seated on a desk, was it even possible to be at a desk? It wasn't. You had to go the tech way. You had to automate, you had to digitize, and allow people to work remotely and access even banking portals from home, if need be. Access these so-called, high security portals from a remote location. All right? So that is something we've had to adopt over time. That us, the older generation, let me say the Gen Xs and even the baby boomers, and even the earlier generation of millennials tend to behave a little bit like Gen Xs, by the way. Allow your mind to be open to ideas. These young people will impress you. They can build technology. They can build software. They want freedom of flexibility. They want freedom of association. They want freedom of expression. They don't want to be boxed into corners. They don't want to be forced to dress up in suits like this if the workspace is a tech workspace. They can come in shorts on a Monday. They can, if they work in a call center, for example. In a call center, who sees you? Nobody. You can come in shorts and sandals, for goodness sake. For as long as you're empowered with the technology to work remotely, you can even work from home. So ultimately, find safe spaces, empower them, give them information, treat them with respect and dignity. Don't belittle them. Don't talk down at them. Talk with them and listen to their thoughts and expressions of opinions. Don't insist on yours being the best way to do it. Allow them to express. You might learn some new things about how to work from them, and you'll really harness the best out of the organization.
Wow. Thank you so much, Joseph. I think there's so much adjustment to make in the workplace. You talked about even the way we address them. It's not about just the systems. It's not about putting systems in place, but even the way we address them. I didn't think, now that you talk about it, it makes sense, but I didn't think calling somebody my son. I know you have bosses who will come and they're demanding for an assignment, and they'll pat you on the shoulder and say, my son, I need this, but I didn't know what it would mean for most of the people in this age bracket. Thank you so much. We have quite a number of questions. But before we get into the questions, we were joined by a lady called Christine Tulo. I don't know if she's online already. She wanted to give a few pointers. She wanted to talk to us about, mental health. She's an expert of mental health, and she's spent, I think, over 20 years in the space of mental health. Christine, I don't know if you're there yet.
Good morning, Christine. I'm good, thank you. Good to hear from you, Tina.
Yeah, nice. So proud of listening to you all having this amazing conversation. I'm thinking to myself as baby boomer, interesting perspective on, just how we need to start preparing for a transition in our workplace. And maybe what I'll just add very briefly is that the workplace, just like Joseph said, is a mix of the different, at least the three generations, maybe four, but at least especially when you're thinking about corporate sector. And no one generation owns the workspace 100%. There's always a transition of people going out, people in the middle, people coming in. And it's something that we then have to think about in terms of how they're going to manage transitional, the transitions between the generations, because that's the only way you can build an organization's legacy. And most of the organizations that have been around, companies that have been around 100 plus years, the reason why they've done that is because they have managed the transition from one generation to another. As we move into this, as we start to prepare, especially for us baby boomers, as we start to prepare to hand over to Gen X, I'm turning 50 this year, and I know workspace, I probably have about another 10, 15 active surveys, and then wanting to slow down and do more interesting fun things with my life. We have to be consciously aware that we are not we're not going to be here forever. But also, even as we are considering our organizations or our companies in terms of leadership from one generation to another, we also have to understand that the same thing is happening to our customers. So when somebody says, I have this high net worth customer and therefore everybody has to suit up around them, you have to remember that coming behind him is going to be another high net worth customer who is jeans, dreadlocks, rocking his life or her life and having an amazing time. So even your customers transition just like your leaders transition. And that's why it's important that leadership is developed across the board. The one thing that I'm just going to say is that the organization also has to be looked at as its own living entity as well, because it is developed with an objective. We all come from an organization that already has an objective, and the only way those objectives change is when the market forces change, and the market forces are the next generation, and there's always going to be, again, just like leadership transition, there's always going to be a market transition as well. So for example, those of us who grew up in banks before ATMs showed up, just what that happened. And you have to go and queue to get your money. And then we transition into the ATM time, and I remember, I think I got my first ATM card, I was 26-ish then. And that's the time when most banks were now really pushing ATMs, And so, and here there's a 23-year-old thinking, wow, what do you mean you go for your money? Yes, we need to go for our money. And now, we go into internet banking, right? So again, it's a home banking. So you can see how the market would actually change the way now the organizations have worked. So for us as baby boomers who are mostly at the helm of our organization, it is in our best interest for the survival of the organization to make sure that we are, like Joseph said, thinking about not just the generation thinking the company, but the generations that are going to purchase our goods. The frustration that workplace always comes from the fact that people get stuck in a rut. People, as Joseph says, don't get tired. But also the external process of how we were brought up enter into the workplace environment. And this is a conversation that I'm enjoying to have with leaders nowadays in the corporate space. Uganda is a very unique country. It's different from Kenya, it's different from Tanzania, it's different from other parts of the world. Any country that has gone through very significant shifts in their generation. We had the wars, we had the HIV card, we had the OBCs, and now we are finally settling as a community, right? And so the way, as much as this generation is so connected to the global village, maybe to the global village, rather than still Ugandan, maybe even African, but largely Ugandan. It's also still within the context of how we were nurtured at home and how this has impacted on our mental health and our perception of our day-to-day. And so the other conflict that comes in is, when baby boomers and us guys who were brought up during the war are interacting with, Gen X's or some of the baby boomers as well, who lost a lot of their parents during the HIV start, and all those pains and unmet mental health needs now coming to the workplace at a melting point. And so some of the conflicts are not just within the workplace, but where people are carrying from home you find a person who, let's say, grew up with a stepmom or grew up with an aunt and uncle, and literally had to fight their way through school, doesn't understand the entitlement of a Gen Z at all, because they struggle to get to where they are. So it's about, having those conversations and also making sure that where we have come to a life of difficulty, it is on us, especially as leaders, to make sure that we cannot heal others. It is our responsibility to seek healing, because when we don't do that, then we pass on misconceptions about the workplace to the next generation. Lastly, I just wanted to talk about rights and privileges. Everybody likes to talk about how Gen Zs know their rights. There are 30 rights, and they are enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Rights. Everything outside of that is a privilege. And some things have become rights because they have become privileges for so long that we have turned them into rights.
Wow.
Case in point. If I have a child who always receives pocket money, that is a privilege, they think it is a right. Yeah? So that there is a consequence to poor behavior, and that pocket money is taken away. We have a kid because you've taken away my right. Actually, because of privilege. So it's important that even as we're bringing up our Gen Zs, that they understand the difference between rights and privileges. Rights are enshrined, they can never be taken away. Privileges, on the other hand, can be taken away, or they can be enhanced. So it's, and even at the workplace, just making sure that you don't turn privileges into rights. Because when you have to have consequences for behavior, it then becomes a problem. So I think I'm just going to end there. I hope I have added something useful to the conversation. Thank you, Helen, for asking me to speak. But yes, we need to do a lot more work, especially in Uganda, to make sure that this next generation, that the Gen Zs who have not grown up in war, who have not grown up in hunger, that generation steers us to the next place of development. And it is on us to make sure that we are teaching them, or we are having conversations about things that went wrong, and making sure that they are able to learn from what we did do well, and what we did well, and then innovate forward. Because our markets are forever changing as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Christine. Very, very good insights. I've made a mental note to go and look at the 30 rights and privileges. You talked about something, and it reminded me. I attended an event, and somebody was speaking to us about, a gentleman was from Safaricom, when she talked about rights and privileges. And she said in their wellness program at work, they were giving the teams, drinks and after work for a certain program, and they were giving them yogurt. They were really doing the most. And then these people, millennials, I imagine they were millennials, came and said, we have an issue about the type of yogurt you're giving us. We want Greek yogurt, we want, specialized yogurt. So when Christine talked about, turning privileges into rights, we need to be sure that we are not turning these privileges into rights. But also Christine said something that I'd like us to all remember, that no one owns the workplace. No one owns the workplace. And for baby boomers, they have a feeling this is our space. These guys, these sons of ours, they will come and go. So I think it's important for all of us to note that no one owns the workplace. Christine also alluded to the fact that certain people are affected by very many things that they carry from home. That's why I would like to briefly introduce to you the Minet Employee Assistance Program. These wellness solutions are part of the Minet Employee Assistance Program. And very, very briefly, what is this? This is a workplace, intervention program, which allows your employees and their families to voluntarily, to deal with issues in a very confidential way, issues that affect them, affect their mental health, affect their physical health, affect, their psychosocial support, without involving you, so that they can come to the workplace as their authentic self. For example, why we talk about their families also, if I'm extending help to Tura, Tura is just an individual at the workplace, but behind her there is a family. So for example, if she's taking care of somebody who is unwell, she's going to be at the workplace and is thinking about, the person who is there. If an employee is struggling with somebody who is an addict, at home, they're thinking about that person. So we'd like to extend these services not just to an individual, because we know that there's an ecosystem around the individual. So I'd like to call upon, if there's an employer here, if there's a CEO, if there's a general manager, if there's an HR, or if you're an employee, I'd like to tap into this, please email us at hope@minet.co.ug. Or you'd like us to come and have these conversations, with your team, just to give them insight. Some of these things are interventional, but sometimes we do it by just educating, because we want to be able to prevent these things to happen in the workplace. We want you to show up and give 100%, because all the other things around you, are taken care of. Again, very many questions. So first I will go to Shamim. You talked about understanding these people. You talked about understanding these people, but somebody wants to know, is there no space for traditional values in the workplace anymore?
Okay, thank you very much. Interesting. Values are very important in how we operate. And when we say traditional, I think then those are buzzwords that are just misleading for us.
Really?
Any organization has its own values. I believe that if I can refer to corporate organizations, for example, each corporate organization has core values. And those core values are enshrined in your fabric, your day-to-day living, in how you do work, how you interact with colleagues, how you interact with clients, for example. And so, and I'll give an example. A lot of organizations say one of our values is integrity. The difference, though, is, yes, and I'm not saying it's bad to have integrity as your core value, but that is expected anyway. If we say one of our core values is integrity, is we tell the truth no matter what. We deal with our clients in a truthful way. Now, you as an insurance broker, you understand what that means for anyone that comes to work with you. Yes. However, how do we become more integral? If I came to you and I say to you, I'm an integral person, or you came to me and told me, oh, one of our values is integrity, and you're not living towards it. It's not about you calling out what I'm not doing. Tell me how to be more integral. What does that mean to you? So when we bring these dichotomies and buzzwords in terms of how we reflect with language, traditional values, what is that? Because also you need to remember in our country, for example, we're a country that has over 40 tribes. Yeah? Each particular, and I hate to use the word tribe because as an anthropologist, that's quite derogatory, but more from a perspective of we all come from different environments, different areas, different traditions. But also, let's give an example of a Muganda girl. The tradition dictates that you kneel down and do XYZ, right? However, you've grown up in the US. You were born in the US. You were Muganda, Ugandan American, but you grew up in the US. What does tradition mean to you? So why I'm bringing this out is not that we do not accept the traditions that we have as a people, but understanding that when we come into the work environment, we are not home. We are at work, which is similar to what Joseph said earlier, that when I find you and you call me your daughter, I'm not your daughter. I have my mom and dad, right? And so you are not saying it because you're belittling me, but because you have no idea that is not reflective in the work environment. And so when we talk about traditional values, let us do away with those buzzwords that will be misleading to us. Organizations have core values, and the core values are we do A, B, C, and D. This is how we live our life. This is how we do things. This is how we deal with situations. And so if you are found from outside of those core values in terms of your operation, then I can hold you accountable to those values and not the traditional values that we have thought about in our community, because where I come from, what's important to you is different from what's important to me. So we have to understand now that we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the fact that I don't kneel doesn't make me someone who is maybe indisciplined. It's just not the value that I know that I buy into. But there are those core values that we believe in, that we respect of colleagues, for example, in the work environment. That is one of the biggest challenges. We think that because you're older, you can talk to me and belittle me in a certain way, but that is a core value. So when we say respect of colleagues in our environment, what does that mean? So let us step away from the buzzwords of tradition and modern. No, core values are core values. They're principles. Just as your father tells you, if you're to live in my house, you should be home by 7 p.m. If you're not home by 7 p.m., don't come back. That is value that is enshrined in your home. And so you know you must be home at that particular time. As I close, core values and principles, let us not be misled by tradition and modern.
Tura, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I just that's a really good submission. I just wanted to say that there is a part that tradition plays in who we are, but what that part is individualistic, is what grounds you as a person. If I am a Muganda girl and I am grounded in who I am as a Muganda girl, then for me to greet an elder, I kneel down. That is my individuality. That is my culture. And in my practice, I will tell you that having a sense of belonging is a big, big deal. And so our traditions and where we come from plays into that individuality that grounds us and gives us a sense of belonging, which gives us a firm standing in who we are, not a firm standing in where we work. Where we work has its own system and how it works, and we should adhere to that. But our traditions play into our individuality, which plays into our authenticity that we're talking about before.
Wow, I see where both of you are coming from. I think you seem to say that it's important to have these values, and especially when we know them from our cultures, our different cultures. At home, they are important. In society, they are important. But I think when we're talking at the workplace, let's not measure each other against these, Let me not expect you to greet your boss at work and behave like a Muganda girl. You've heard people say these funny things, in office. Greet me like a good girl, things like that, because they want you to behave a certain way. Tura, before I move on from you, statistics show that more than a third of the Gen Zs and Millennials are receiving mental health support and interventions already. What does this say about them? Are they just self-aware and putting in the work, or they are a disturbed lot that lacks any form of resilience? And what does this mean for the people who are around them?
Thank you for that. Stigma is a problem worldwide. And it is a good thing that the generation Gen Z is playing a big part in lifting that stigma. There was a lot of stigma about HIV in the 90s, for example. HIV was a death sentence. You find out you have HIV, you go to the village to die, right? Now, the real power of lifting stigma is that powerful companies, for example, in this nation, let's say MTN and all of these companies, once stigma is lifted, they put money into research. When you put money into research, forget the stigma of, oh my God, you're dirty because you have HIV. That's also there, but that's not as impactful as all the companies that can actually put money into research, and then medication is found, solutions are found. Today, HIV is not a death sentence. 2,000 people die of suicide in this nation. By the time COVID ended here, we had 3,000 and something deaths. We had 2 lockdowns. The businesses were destabilized. Things were paralyzed. Every single year. And those are the suicides that are reported at hospitals. As you know, most suicides, you rush to the village. Stigma, while it sounds like a game to us. That person, she's mad. That person, me, I have OCD. While you think it's a game, 2,000 people are dying in this nation every year. You won't think it's a game when it starts to affect you. Anxiety is real, and it is debilitating, and it affects every one of us. Anxiety, by the way, is predominantly a female affliction, right? Now, just because you're not aware of it and you just think you're a quiet person, or you're a person who does not like to socialize, or just because you haven't gotten into it does not mean that it's not there. Yeah, it has been there. From 1925, that is when the health model was changed from a biomedical model, which is basically you need medicine to solve health problems, to a biopsychosocial issue. 1925, that's when quantum physics came in. That's when all the behavior sciences came in. Why? Because the killer diseases were no longer infectious diseases. The health model moved from that to chronic illnesses, to diabetes, to cancer, to mental health issues, to all kinds of behavior. These are lifestyle illnesses That's why we're all here, most of us here, as social scientists. Okay, so 1925. Just because you still have a certain misunderstanding of what mental health is. If you think that the people who come to see me are people who are mentally ill or psychotic or running on the street, if you think mental illness is madness, then you're speaking out of maybe privilege, because you have not had a mental health issue or your child hasn't, But majority of people in this country have experienced that issue, and so these people who have now lifted stigma and are able to come into psychotherapy and are able to resolve their mental issues, how you think is powerful into who you are today, right? A human being has up to 60,000 thoughts a day, and those thoughts are impacted by so many other things that are unbeknownst to you. But how you think affects how you feel. How you feel affects how you act. How you act is how you behave, right? How you behave is who you are, is your personality. So your personality, to check it and affect change, you must go back to what your thought patterns are, to what your self-identity is. I could go on and on, but to answer that question immediately, it's just self-awareness.
They are
That's
putting
what
in
it
the
is.
work, and we should applaud them.
Yes,
Wow.
we should.
Thank you so much. We're running out of time. But Joseph, I want to ask this question: to what extent are we able to analyze the mental stability of an employee without causing stigma and help them rise above their mental health challenges?
The first is awareness. I know that the Hope at Minet program, which we started in 2020 in the first lockdown, in partnership at that time with Strategic Engagement and HRMAU and ICF Uganda Charter Chapter, on which I served on the board at the time, we made it public to talk about mental health issues. We removed the stigma. We blew the lid off the whole aspect of stigma. We stopped using words, derogatory words such as mad, imbecile, retards, and so on. We stopped using such things. Somebody who is mentally sick is just mentally sick. Somebody who has a diagnosable mental disorder has a mental disorder. They are sick or have a disorder. They're not mad. They are not psychopathic or whatever, derogatory terminology we might have been using in the past. In fact, it's even worse in our vernaculars. You look around for words that define mental illness in our vernaculars, and they are quite few, but they're also very derogatory. They don't refer to them in a way that's dignified. And in reality, in my practice as an HR practitioner and a mental health advocate, I've seen at least a few hundreds of mental breakdowns in my career, of high-ranking people, CEOs, MDs, general managers, heads of HR, complete mental breakdown where they have to be hospitalized for 3 months or beyond. So let's blow the lid off stigma. Let's talk about it normally. Let's normalize employee assistance programs like what Minet does. Individual organizations can do that as well, have employee assistance programs. And let's ensure that when somebody needs help, they get the help they need now. Psychotherapy, that is through people like Leona, who is a psychologist, clinical psychologist, and does counseling. People like Tina and Tura, organizations such as Mental Health Uganda. These people, Strong Minds Uganda, they provide psychosocial, and there are many. I'm not advertising any particular organization here. There are so many organizations and individual therapists. Also, let them seek treatment. Now, if somebody is actually sick, we have medical insurance. People like Minet here ensure that the medical insurance covers not just treatment, but also counseling. Counseling is not necessarily, there's no tablet called counseling, right? It's talking, it's talk therapy. So let people access, using their medical insurance cards, let them also be able to access counseling services or therapy. And I think that should then improve the general safe space of the workplace. And let's encourage leaders. The tone at the top, 60% of mental health challenges at the workplaces are driven by toxic and narcissistic leaders. 60%. So leaders need to be very mindful of the tone they set. As a leader, you have power. When you talk, you command authority. And if you're a toxic leader, then how much worse is that for your organization? So be a fair leader, be consistent, be empathetic, be a good listener. And let's create safe spaces for people to open up and say, I'm feeling a certain kind of way. I may not work next week. Allow me to take a week's break because I am stressed. I'm going through mental breakdown. I'm going through work burnout. Burnout is a real issue in the corporate world.
Wow.
Thank you.
Joseph says, let's blow the lead. Joseph reminds me about something that somebody said at an event again, and said, for us to demystify mental health, we need to know that the brain is a part of the body, just like we have. Leona said, the legs are for walking, the mouth is for talking, all those things. And just like the legs could get sick, your arms could get sick, your ears could suffer, the brain could also suffer, and let's acknowledge that. Joseph talked about some of our human capital solutions, talked about medical insurance. If you have a medical a cover and it's not all inclusive, and you want it to be reviewed so that you get the best out of what you're paying, Minet is able to do that. Like I said, we're in the business of risk advisory. Please reach out to us at hope@minet.co.ug, and we're able to offer you support, wellness, employee assistance programs, because if you're an HR person, your specialty is in HR. If you're a finance person, your specialty is in finance. So we want to be able to take the burden, the psychosocial support from you, so that you can focus on what you are supposed to do. And we run that program, like I said, in a very, very confidential way, so that people are seeking support that they may not want you to know. Sometimes people don't want to come to you and say, I'm struggling because I have somebody at home who is an addict and it's taking a mental, toll on me. They want to be able to seek support, see a counselor, and be in a place where they can come and work without having that, weigh on their minds. Thank you so much. We're running out of time when it's an interesting conversation. It seems like we've been here for about 15 minutes, but I want to give an opportunity for all our panelists to give their parting shots. Shamim, over to you.
Thank you very much. My parting shot. What do I say? I will challenge our leaders to lead with empathy. Like Joseph said, as a leader, you already have the power. You don't have to tell us that you do. And so what it means by leading with empathy is show understanding, show consideration, have respect for your colleagues, and understand that as a leader, you are there to serve. The tone of leadership really determines a lot of what happens on the bottom line. Wow. Thank you.
The tone of leadership determines what happens at the bottom line. Wow. Leona.
I just want to remind everybody that Uganda has the second largest, youngest workforce. Yeah. So whether you like to deal with Gen Zs or not, you don't really have any control over that anymore. They are set to inherit up to $30 trillion, from us. Are we empowering these people? Maybe it's time for us to release these preconceptions that we have of generations that are after us and accept evolution with open minds and kind hearts. That's all. Wow. Open minds. Understand that these people are not just useless, inadequate, inexperienced time wasters. They're individuals and entities that are set to inherit. Well, along with the $30 trillion is also climate change and, geopolitical issues. But they have a big responsibility ahead of them that we cannot be there to take over to do. And so support. Wow. Support is the only way forward. Wow. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about the money that you said that they are yet to the 30 trillion. Yes, yes. And part of the services that we offer in our employee assistance programs is coaching, which also includes financial coaching. We know that sometimes the mental stress or the stress at the workplace is caused by it's financial. Sometimes the lack of finances or the poor management of finances. Yes. Sometimes you have employees who are struggling, and it's not because they're earning little money, but it's because they fail to manage the money that they have, the much or the little money that they have. Again, reach out to us, hope@minet.co.ug. We don't offer the same services to all organizations. Organizations are unique, they are different. So when we come in, we don't just impose any services onto you. We run an assessment so that we are able to know what exactly solutions you need for the needs that you have. Joseph, what are your parting shots?
Thank you very much, Doreen, for hosting us, and Minet, Helen, and the team here at Minet for hosting us on this program. My parting shot is, and I'm addressing you who is watching us at home, or in your office, or in your car, or listening to us without necessarily turning on your video. Are you struggling with stress? Are you burnt out? Are you sad? Have you been sad for more than 2 weeks non-stop? Are you crying yourself to sleep every night? Have you had a life-changing moment in the recent few weeks, like you've lost a loved one? Have you just gone through a divorce or a separation or a breakup? Have you just lost something valuable to you, like a lot of money? You've been defrauded, a business crisis. You are suicidal. You're thinking of taking your own life because you're feeling helpless, worthless, and useless. You are not any of those things. You are not defined by your circumstances. You are much better than who you think you are. Reach out, seek help, speak to a loved one, speak to a spouse, a child, a parent, a friend, a partner, a colleague. Talk to your HR manager. Seek help and go to a therapist if possible. And you will be fine. If need be, seek treatment. You shall be fine.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Joseph. Thank you so much, Tura, and thank you so much, Shamim. If you'd like the contacts of the panelists that we had, or you'd like somebody to come and speak to your organization, Minet, in partnership with our panelists, please write to us at hope@minet.co.ug. The reason we have these conversations is to be able to inform you, We don't have these conversations just for the sake of it. We have topical issues. Sometimes you reach out to us and say, please talk about this. Or if there's something weighing on you, please reach out to us. We can always have thought leaders to come and speak into it. Follow us on all our social media, Minet, on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on Twitter. We'll be here again next month. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.